Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our weekly show On the Spot, a political roundup and analysis of New York politics. We're going to talk about the latest, what's been happening just this week alone. I think many of us were expecting Cuomo's resignation, but the fallout is what we're going to be discussing and what this means for state politics going forward and how does this impact New York City. Our guests tonight, joining us tonight, are Michael Oliva from Sykes Global Communications, Leonardo Coello, campaign advisor, and we will be joined shortly by Michael Benjamin from the New York Post. So, gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural On the Spot weekly show, where we're going to be just, talking what's happening in politics, what's happening on the state, city, and also federal levels. So before we get started, I want to ask you to please, take a minute to introduce yourself. We'll start with Michael.
Oh, thank you. My name is Michael Oliva. I am president of Sykes Global Communications. It's a PR firm. We do everything from political campaigns, work with corporations, nonprofits, city and state agencies, and we are always there to take on clients that we feel are socially active in a way that benefits, people.
Thank you. And Leonardo, if you please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Mona. Happy to be here again. My name is Leonardo Coello. I am a Bronx native. I've been working in campaigns for a few years now as a campaign advisor, and worked on some field and a couple of different campaigns in this last election cycle.
Thank you, gentlemen. So there's so much happening. I don't even know where to start. So let's start with Cuomo, with Governor Cuomo's resignation. Michael, did you think that he'd survive this? I think he thought he would survive this.
I was sort of on the fence. It's the kind of thing where Democrats tend to sort of eat their own. Somebody gets into trouble, we pile on. I mean, if you saw Scott Stringer, it didn't take 5 minutes before half the city was telling them to drop out of the race. With Republicans, you tend to see them sort of just back the person who's in some sort of hot water, and they stick it out. And I know that Cuomo is, a tough guy, and I thought there may be a way if he sort of persisted and, unleashed his attorneys and, went after everybody who was who had made these allegations. I thought he had a chance, but the other side of me said, it's too many people, it's too much heat, it's too distracting, and so I was sort of on the fence, but I wasn't shocked that he announced his resignation.
Yeah, at first he came out, pardon the pun, guns blazing, especially going after Miss Boylan, and he was very aggressive. But I guess it was just too much. Leonardo, what did you think? Did you think he was going to survive this? He survived everything else.
Yeah, this really seemed like it was a situation where his greatest strength became his weakness. Like Michael said, the governor has been known as a fighter, and that was on full display during the pandemic. But in this particular situation, it kind of became his weakness at that point, because there were just certain things that you just can't fight at that point, and so I think it dragged the process out longer than it needed to be. I didn't feel like he was going to be able to survive this, and so it was just inevitable at the end of the day.
Yes. What was your first indication or the biggest indicator for you that he wasn't going to survive this, he was going to resign? For me, it was when Melissa resigned. What about you, Michael? What was the sign for you?
There really wasn't one. I like I said, I sort of was watching it happen. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. And I talked to a few people who were very close to him, and they weren't sure either till the last minute. It was really, I was speaking to people the night before who really weren't sure what he was going to do. But I think there was a growing sense that the more, certain people who had backed him in the past, like a lot of the black elected officials who had backed him in the past were changing their tune. So it like that was, that was the people who stayed with him until the end, when this first started to boil up. And when they started to sort of say, no, we're thinking about impeachment now, I said, this is looking pretty dark for Cuomo.
Yes, no. Leonardo, and for you, what was that? Did you have?
Yeah, I felt that as soon as the report came out, I thought it was over for him, because I think ultimately everybody was erring on the side of caution of saying, hey, let's let the legal process play out. Let's let the attorney general, go through this process first. And once the report came out, at that point, no one could side with him anymore. Like, the report was out, very detailed, everything was there. So once the report came out, it was pretty much over. And you saw it became like a domino effect.
Yes.
Once the attorney general put it out, it went from the White House all the way, to Albany, to here in the city. Everybody calling for his resignation.
Yeah, it was also, I was watching Tucker Carlson, and he was talking about, he said it was a grand conspiracy, but the interesting thing is, and some of them are escaping me right now, there's a history in the state where the attorney general will sort of like go after the governor, who's their boss, and they had their own expectations of what their success may be. And Cuomo did it with Spitzer. It's the chickens do come home to roost in these scenarios. And I think Leonardo's point is very good, because it's, once that attorney general sort of goes after you, there's that sense that there's something here, because that's a big deal for the attorney general to go after the person who employs, not hires them, but is their ultimate boss.
That's true. We're joined by Michael Benjamin, former state assemblyman for District 79, and who is the editorial board of the New York Post. Michael, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Please.
Glad to be here.
Please introduce yourself, and then tell us your take on Cuomo's resignation. Did you think that he was going to do it, or did you think that he was going to survive it? But first, please, introduce yourself.
It's what he did. It's Michael Benjamin, editorial board member, New York Post. Before that, I was in the state assembly for about 8 years, 2003 to 2011, and then after that, I did some column writing for the Post and other publications. And I went to work full time at the Post 5 years ago, writing editorials and covering politics and public policy. Got to tell you, the governor's resignation this week surprised me. I had watched his attorney, plead his case, try to tear down the accusations, try to tear down each of the 11 women who accused him. And then, 45 minutes later, after she was done, he comes on and starts talking about the needs of the state and putting the state ahead of his own interests, and then saying he'd be resigning in about 2 weeks, and then going on to talk about his record. So again, he was looking to control the narrative, which is so much Cuomo. He wanted to control everything to the bitter end. Today's paper, the editorial board had a editorial where we called on the legislature, the assembly in particular, to continue its impeachment probe and to impeach the governor. It's more than just the 11 women who've accused him of sexual misconduct and harassment. It's the nursing home issue, the deaths of nursing home patients, the elderly. due to an order that he and his health commissioner gave, and then their efforts to cover it up when the Trump administration began to investigate to try to get to the truth of it. And then his effort to demonize and threaten Assemblyman Ron Kim, who lost a relative to COVID in a nursing home. And so he was rightly upset and wanting accountability and answers. The governor called him in the middle of the night while he's trying to bathe his children and threatening him and going so far as that, I know stuff about you. I can ruin you. This is a man who needs to be stopped and to be stopped now, and to set a precedent for future abusive governors that legislature will not tolerate it. I mean, the Assembly, I believe, has no choice. I mean, leading up to the whole impeachment process, there's been talk about there having been no real precedent as to what rules to follow. Well, Governor Salzberg was successfully impeached. He didn't win any kind of appeal. He was gone. Legislature, it's a political process. They can make up the rules as they go along. Courts are usually unlikely to interfere with an impeachment process and with a possible conviction in the state Senate because members of the Court of Appeals are among the jurors. I think it needs to continue, and we need to get to the bottom of things that transpired. The very fact the governor appears to have used state resources on his $5 million book deal, getting staff to help him write a book that he would profit from personally. Now, that's highly unfair, and that's also abusive of one staff, and that needs to be investigated and gotten to the bottom of.
Wow. So I guess there's no deal for him. He could have closed the deal of I resign, you leave me alone, I get to keep my pension. I mean,
yeah, and there's been talk of that, but I understand he did it privately, and the speaker turned. I mean, I don't know how far they're going to go with it, but they were making a deal with him resigning and then ending the impeachment process. This is not something he controlled like the Moreland Commission, where he can run and control that. And then when it appeared they're going to be investigating him and his donors, that's when he shut it down. And that's when he let Shelley and Dean Skelos off the hook and went back to business as usual.
Wow. I mean, Mike, what do you hear? What is the scuttlebutt? Do you also think that they're going to move ahead with the impeachment, so that they should, or do you think we should just let the governor let Cuomo ride into the sunset instead of making sure he never runs for office and he loses his pension?
Right. I mean, there's often an unspoken deal in these scenarios. Think of sort of like ultimately Richard Nixon, right? But we're sort of, it's sort of like, well, if you go away, we'll leave you alone. But it's not just, the legislature. He's open to civil litigation. He's open to criminal, prosecution. Because you have 12 people who have accused him of these acts. And, of course, there should be due process. But just because, the Assembly doesn't decide to go forth with impeachment, it doesn't mean that, criminal courts and private people don't decide to take action on their own. So, he's not necessarily in the clear just because he's free of, what the state government does.
So, Leonardo, can do you think one day we're going to see Cuomo doing the perp work? Does it?
I'm not sure, Mona, but I'll be honest with you. The only information I can pass on really is what I'm hearing from my community. And from my community's perspective, folks are looking for this to go away already, because there are a lot of things on the, coming down the line that people are very nervous about, and they're looking for our state leaders to give us some guidance on and stuff, right? So, and very, especially the guidance around our schools reopenings and stuff, right? So there's still a lot of, gray area that the state has not given some guidance around about how are our schools going to reopen? Are there going to be mask mandates? Are the teachers going to be required to have vaccinations? There's just so many things that we're looking for clarity on. Like, I think the Assembly has to also think about not coming across as like this angry mob, while there's all this other stuff happening that the communities are like, okay, we need some answers on this now. Like the guy is resigning, you know, let the DAs and the counties do their job. If there's some criminal aspects around that, let them deal with that. But there's some other serious stuff that we need some guidance that is coming down the line in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And also, let me just jump on that point. You know, I can't tell you how many people I spoke to who, and let me just make clear, I am not belittling these accusations. They're serious accusations, and they should be, you know, investigated fully. But, you know, not everybody from the islands of the city to upstate is a wokester, you know, and for them, that it was almost like a distraction. And they said, you know, I love the way he handled the COVID situation. Now, whether or not that's right, and we can talk about the senior centers and everything else, there were people who did appreciate it. You saw the polls that just came out where he was basically trouncing his primary opponents. So I think for most regular people who aren't, you know, the 5% of noisemakers on Twitter, they'd like it to go away somewhat quietly, and sort of, some of them don't even want him to go away. But if anything, they don't want to see him, you know, sort of subject to prosecution.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I've, you know, speaking to different people. I mean, of course, we know Twitter is not real life, but it's loud. But there are quite a few people that say, you know, this is not something that Cuomo should be resigning over. What happened to due process?
Right.
No one is trying to minimize the experiences or the allegations, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. So a lot of people are saying, you know, he's competent, he's done a good job. And to have this type of upheaval right now is not going to help us. I know quite a few people, even women, who do believe that he did not have proper due process. And a lot of people paid attention to his attorney. I forgot her name. Is it Glavin? You know, listen to what she said when she spoke about the fact that, you know, they requested information, they requested the testimony. There was no stenographer or court reporter taking notes. Some people really do feel he was railroaded.
Yeah, I mean, even going back to my my Fox News viewing on YouTube, you know, they were discussing sort of like contradictions in the Attorney General's report, where there are sections of it where women said, well, they didn't mind it. And, you know, of course, like, that's the stuff that you generally see, which is more sensational, and it gets people thinking, like, wait a minute, we really haven't seen this scrutinized fully. Mm-hmm. And everything that Michael brought up is, you know, extremely serious stuff. And, you know, I think they're more looking at stuff like that, like, oh, did he handle the senior center situation correctly? Like, that's something I think people are more concerned with at the moment, because it's such, you know, it's a tough time that we're going through, and they feel like, you know, this is the kind of thing that should be looked at, but maybe shouldn't be front and center of the news every day. If that makes sense.
No, that is true. So it's going to be interesting. I have to say though, Kathy Hochul, I don't know that much about her, whether good or bad. For me, she seems somewhat quiet. You know, no one really has anything negative to say about her, but we don't really know her. But I was really surprised in reading some of her remarks, some of the things that she said. For example, when she said that they really weren't that close. For me, I was like, wow, that's that says a lot. And reading some of her statements or comments, like she's sounding very assertive. So it's interesting to compare that to what we've been seeing of Kathy Hochul all these years, being so quiet. under Cuomo's shadow, to see her now in the spotlight. And
But that's
finally,
the role of a lieutenant governor. I mean, nobody wants lieutenant governor who's going to shine. When Mario Cuomo was lieutenant governor to Governor Hugh Carey, he kept his distance. He kept quiet. Marianne Krupsak, when she was lieutenant governor under, I believe Hugh Carey, she began to have opinions. She began to talk about policy. That did not sit well with Governor Carey. Then she ran against him for governor. That's when he picked up Mario Cuomo as his lieutenant governor. Doesn't work out that way. Mario Cuomo picked a nice, quiet, retiring congressman from upstate New York as his lieutenant governor. They got along famously. When George Pataki first selected Betsy McCrory Ross, she was trouble from the word go. And then he found another woman to replace her, and she was nice and quiet. Served for 8 years as lieutenant governor. Didn't want to run for governor. She did her thing. Hochul did her thing. I mean, don't take her quiet as not being a political woman. I mean, the Erie County Democrats, they've got their own machine, just as powerful as the Brooklyn machine or the Bronx machine or the Manhattan or Queens Democrats down here in New York. She's not a shy retiring type. She didn't get to be lieutenant governor by being a wallflower. She's got some skills. Her husband is a former U.S. attorney in the Buffalo area. She's got some chops. When she was Erie County clerk, and Governor Spitzer proposed providing driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. Basically, he was restoring something that Governor Pataki had shut off in response to 9/11. But many people were opposed to having that done, and she was one of them. She joined a great number of upstate county clerks, many of them being Republicans, who were opposed to issuing driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. And upstate New York, it's the county clerks who have the role of a DMV when it comes to issuing driver's licenses, unlike here in New York City. And then when she became lieutenant governor, her positions changed to match more of the governors. I think she is as prepared to be governor as David Paterson, who was lieutenant governor when I served in the assembly, and I was there when Eliot Spitzer suddenly resigned after his name popped up in a report in the New York Times. He didn't ask for 2 weeks. He announced he was gone that afternoon. David Paterson was governor by misfortune in a sense, and he was forced to take the reins of government and to move the state forward. I think Kathy Hochul will have the ability to do that. And I checked the governor's Flickr account to look for pictures of Kathy Hochul with him. And the last set of pictures she had with him, she's absolutely correct. It was January 25th of 2021 when they're together in Buffalo, discussing. I forgot the issue. I forget what it was, but that's the last time they were together, and there was some distance between the two of them. So she is absolutely correct that she was not in his company a lot. She knows government. I mean, she was one of his surrogate speakers each and every time he had a State of the State address. She would be among those who would go to different parts of the state to sort of redeliver it. And also when he did his executive budget, she was among those who would go out and discuss it with constituents around the state. So she had the handle on government. And the governor, in addition to not really meeting with her, he really hadn't met with many members of his own cabinet. They've complained that they don't have much access to him. He was a one-man show. He worked with his inner circle on the second floor in Albany, and they went out and gave orders to the rest of the government. And that's the way he operated. Kathy Hochul says she's going to be different. I wish her luck. I hope she will be different. I hope she does clean house, and she gets her own team together and does what she needs to do to advance her own cause as governor. And then if she wants to run for re-election, as she said she does, make an appeal to the people, the Democrats. And, I think she'll have a contentious primary. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Why? Mike, from what you heard, were you aware of this chasm between Hochul and Cuomo all this time?
Well,
Because I never know. I didn't see anybody really writing about it. No reporters or pundits like saying anything about it.
I feel, first of all, I think Michael makes a good point about, she was a fairly conservative Democratic congresswoman, I believe. And I would even argue that the Erie machine is more powerful than borough machines. I mean, if you look, there's a lot less rebellion, right? If you look at the Brooklyn surrogates race, the crown jewel of the county parties, what they want to win, they got trounced. That doesn't happen in places up there. But I was actually, I think they were sort of tied at the hip in the beginning, and over time that the relationship soured. And there was a lot of talk behind the scenes of Cuomo picking Byron Brown as lieutenant governor. Byron Brown inexplicably didn't try in his re-election campaign and lost. But, so yeah, there was a sense that they were definitely growing apart. But, as far as her candidacy, if you remember, she only beat Jumaane Williams by 2 or 3 points in the statewide race. And I don't say that like as a disparaging remark. I say that because, as Leonardo knows, I mean, she went uptown, she went to the Bronx, she won a lot of clubs, she made a lot of connections. She penetrated enough in the city that she was able to take on like a candidate from the city who was very well known. And sort of fend him off in a time when the progressive message was resonating very well. So she is savvy, she is a hard worker, and she's going to maintain some of those connections now. And the power of incumbency, when you're talking about political clubs and organizations, that's a big deal. And she's built a good infrastructure to go forward with.
Well, speaking, you make a good point, Mike, about Hochul has been networking. And yes, it was very close between her and Jumaane Williams. But one thing I have noticed about Hochul is that she comes down to the Bronx. Right. There's a picture from a couple of weeks ago at a county's event. This photo here with Lieutenant Governor, soon to be our governor, Kathy Hochul, with the Estella B. Is it Estella B. Diggs, Michael?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Gene Edwards is there with the BX sign, and Hochul, and this is right here in the Bronx a couple of weeks ago. So she's clearly on the ground and engaging everyone. She's not just staying upstate. She's downstate, and maybe she saw the handwriting on the wall before Governor Cuomo. But just continuing on with Hochul, today's announcement that she's going to have New York State Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins as her lieutenant governor. We have the photo here, as you can see. You see Hochul. This is Kathy Hochul. For folks who don't know who Kathy Hochul is, which is a lot of people do not know who she is, but that's our current lieutenant governor, Kathy Hochul. And that is next to her is Andrea Stewart-Cousins, New York State Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who represents Westchester County, and who is now going to be our new lieutenant governor. So, Michael, how exactly does this work? So she's going to stay on in the Senate, right? Stay in her leadership position, and at the same time take on the lieutenant governor responsibilities.
Are you referring to her being nominated as the permanent lieutenant governor or the acting lieutenant governor when Hochul becomes governor?
The acting. But my question also is she likely going to be the permanent one under Hochul?
There's some speculation of that occurring. There's no absolute word on it. But under the Constitution, when Hochul elevates to governor in 2 weeks, the Senate Majority Leader becomes the acting lieutenant governor. And as you know, lieutenant governors basically are also the presiding officers of the Senate anyway. So yes, she could, in a sense, hold both positions. And it will still be run by Mike Gianaris and the other leadership in the state Senate until there's a permanent lieutenant governor. And there are some who think Hochul might pick a downstate person like Andrew Stewart Cousins to be her lieutenant governor. One, she's African American, she's a woman. She can help her with some of the upstate areas like Monroe County and Buffalo, where you have African American mayors. I think they're African American female mayors, if I'm not mistaken, and that'll be helpful to Hochul, who I think really wants to be governor elected next year. This would help her in muting and possibly getting the Attorney General Tish James from running against their team. Jumaane Williams probably doesn't care; he'd probably run anyway, if that's his intent. So it'll be interesting. But yes, and answer to your question, Stewart Cousins as acting lieutenant governor could still hold her position as a Senate Majority Leader, and in a sense do both jobs. But Hochul has said on day one she's going to announce her candidate, her person that she wants for lieutenant governor. So she's not going to go a couple of weeks. And because of the precedent set by David Paterson in selecting Richard Ravitch as his lieutenant governor, be a much smoother process. And lieutenant governor who she selects will be able to hit the ground running, be approved by the state Senate, and assume the full duties of the lieutenant governor. And I guess together they would run as a team in the next election in June of 2022. And then if they win, then the general election in that November.
I want to come back to that, but I want to ask Leonardo. Leonardo, do you know anything about Hochul's relationships with our Latino community? Has she worked with anyone before in the past? Is there a relationship there, especially since she's going to be running for governor?
Yeah, no, I haven't really heard anything, her resonating that much in the Latino community. As a matter of fact, going back to what Michael talked about of her opposing the IDs for Latino immigrants, that was something that's one of the first. Latinos. Yeah, that's one of the things that kind of popped up and became a topic of conversation within the Latino community. Just what her stance was on that and stuff. I didn't really hear too much about that being something that kind of extra out for them, but it was just more about what her stance was on that particular topic and stuff. But I do want to share a little bit of a sentiment, Mona, where there seems to be a little bit of nervous energy now as well too, from almost kind of like the Latino Democrat community, because that's what they're feeling from the Democratic community, as a whole. When we have the midterm elections coming up, and one of the items that's making the Democrats very nervous is that the progressives are going to kind of eat away and erode at the unity of the Democratic Party, and then it's going to kind of come back to bite us because of all the infighting that's going to be happening, right? And so there's some nervous energy around this lieutenant governor because, as Michael explained, she only beat Jumaane by just a few digits and stuff, and so we all know that Jumaane is very, very much supported by the progressive left wing, and so now we're talking about going into a primary that is going to really kind of eat away at the Democratic Party here in New York City. Folks are nervous that we might be cracking the door open to maybe even possibly a Republican governor stepping in and taking advantage of some infighting that the Democrats might do, and we're talking about possibly us losing seats in Congress, and maybe even losing the blue state of New York to a Republican governor as well too.
I agree. I mean, I feel like if you have a Republican candidate who presents well, talks about safety, talks about lower taxes, fiscal responsibility, cleaning up the environment, perhaps, a few progressive issues, healthcare, and isn't a Trumpster type, but is sort of a serious person. I don't think it's out of reach for the Republican Party to take a statewide election in this current environment.
Oh, that is really interesting for you to say, Mike.
There's always an ebb and flow. Parties are always dead until they're not. I mean, it's just I think there's an opening for a moderate Republican who comes in and sort of like talks sense. And if the Democrats are putting on a show and they're more concerned about what bathroom you use than your taxes, it could happen. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point. Because when we look at what happened with the mayoral race, I don't think people so much expected, Eric Adams's public safety platform, considering the defund NYPD movement and the leftists and the socialists, but he prevailed. So, Michael, do you see something like that happening with the Republicans? I mean, can they pull something off? Can someone like Lee Zeldin pull something off, or any of the other Westchester candidates?
You're referring to me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
You're Michael and he's Mike.
Okay, got it. I got it. It's possible. I think based on what Leonardo said, it depends on who wins the Democratic, primary. Will it be Hochul and her lieutenant governor? And that might, if that lieutenant governor is not a person is not a Latino, if you have Latino leaders like Councilman Reverend Diaz, who's going to grouse very publicly and very loud about Latinos being taken for granted, and in 2021, not having any high profile positions. And he is known, to embrace Republicans. He embraced Rudy Giuliani when he ran for mayor in New York City under Democrats with Giuliani. He entertained Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz is running for president. And he's done stuff with then Governor George Pataki. He is known to do things with Republicans who do things for him and his belief for his community, and he repays them with political assistance and getting votes out there. It'll be interesting. I think a centrist candidate like a Hochul and whomever is her will be able to keep white voters upstate in the party. A Jumaane Williams and another lefty possibly winning and running the Democratic nomination. Yeah, you're going to see white Democrats who are moderate to conservative Democrats are going to be voting for Lee Zeldin, whoever the Republicans put up, because they don't want to see, in their minds, they don't want to see the Reds taking over New York State. They don't want to see the socialists doing this, doing X, Y, and Z. And you're going to hear a lot more about critical race theory and Jumaane Williams and all this other stuff that you would hear if he were the nominee. Kathy Hochul, you're not going to hear a lot about that stuff because that's not where her head is at. And she's talked about doing bread and butter stuff. She's telling parents, my priority as governor will be your kids going to school in the fall and doing it safely. So she's going to look at the pocketbook issues, the things that motivate the basic average New York State Democratic voter and suburban voter that she needs in order to win the nomination and then to win a general election. But I don't believe.
But Michael, don't you think you got to be a little careful, because I remember a lot of folks saying that Catherine Garcia was the most prepared candidate to step in and run the city. Like she had the work that she's done with sanitation. She basically said she was running the city during the time that she was there, and she squeaked it out. Adam squeaked it out on her, and so the nerves that our people have is that, like a Jumaane or somebody would squeak something out against her in the Democratic primary, and then all of a sudden, in the general, like as you mentioned, a kind of a centrist Republican then steps up and gives that counter narrative, and now folks are going with the Republican. I think that's where the biggest nerves are that I'm feeling in the community.
Yeah, I feel Latinos could possibly be part of a coalition that, in response to a Democrat who may not be into public protection, that they could peel away enough votes where they could seriously win enough of the important counties to take the election as George Pataki did in 1994.
I wouldn't. I don't think we can leave out. We're not talking about Tom Suozzi at all. Eric Adams' victory sort of like gave people the feeling that, people need you to say something for you to vote for that thing. If everybody's chasing each other left and nobody's saying those things, well, nobody's going to vote for the person because there's no centrist candidate. And I think that Suozzi was prescient in the sense that he did back Eric Adams, and fairly strongly. There's pictures on his Facebook page where he's marching right with him, and he could sort of make some inroads into the city. As we know, Italian Americans from both parties tend to do well in these citywide and statewide races. The names throughout history. So I wouldn't count him out either. He may sort of ride that centrist wave as well, and maybe people who aren't willing to go Republican because of the aftermath of Trump may say, this is sort of a sensible choice for me.
Right. It will all be interesting and keep us talking for over a year.
Yeah, Mona will have a lot of content of a Little Africa news.
Mm-hmm. So now, what does this mean for Tish? Do any of you think Tish will run for governor?
I don't think so. I'm with those who believe that she's going to hang her hat on trying to get a conviction of Donald Trump, and then use that to possibly, in a couple years, if Chuck decides to step down or Gillibrand decides to do something else, she can then run for U.S. Senate and enjoy her years as one of 100 rather than as the governor where you have to run things and deal with headaches and people throwing rocks at you.
Right. And possibly much less competitive race.
I agree with Michael, especially with, I don't know how anybody else feels about, or how she feels about it, but I think you do have to be concerned of how voters will look at you running for the position that you kind of made sure that the person, was taken out of that position and stuff, right? I think you have to be concerned of how that looks sometimes to voters. And, you do have to worry about, winning a general. I think sometimes folks that we have a New York City bias, we tend to just think about primaries, right? Because by the time, if you win your primary, it's over. Like, we don't have to worry about general. But when we're talking about state, she's like, you do have to consider that and stuff. So I do think that she has to think about how that looks, that you were, like the primary piece of bringing Cuomo down, and then you're jumping up to fill his shoes and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is definitely true. Well, I guess we're going to find out what's going to happen, but I think the prediction of if someone like Jumaane Williams wins that primary, those upstate voters are definitely going to come out. And even for us New York voters, I don't know about us voting for Jumaane as governor. I don't see it. I know moderates like myself, and I'll just say it, I am voting for Jumaane. I'll be trolling Jumaane, but not voting for Jumaane. So it's going to be interesting, because I don't think it's just going to be white voters and other moderates. I think we'll be surprised at what people do in November in that voting booth. So it's definitely going to be interesting.
I also think that Eric's victory sort of like allowed people that freedom to say, wait a minute, I can think this way. And Jumaane too. He used to be criticized for being conservative, and he sort of got into coalition with the Working Families Party and all these sort of groups, and became a true believer because it worked. And he's not going to change that message, because his whole infrastructure, everybody around him, everybody he talks to, that's what they're about. That's how he's going to run. And in a primary, it can work, and then you may have some trouble.
Yes, I agree with you, Mike, on that. I definitely agree. So now, but so here's the wild card. The man, you'll know who I'm talking about. The man ran for president. Do you think he will possibly run for governor? You'll know who I'm talking about. Our mayor. No, it's a genuine question. He ran for president.
No comment.
Yeah, Michael Benjamin. Do you think de Blasio? Do you think that he's going to run for governor?
Yeah.
He has enough of an ego that he would run. You know, he has enough of an ego he would run. It depends on whether or not fellow Brooklynites are running for governor. I think if Tisha's running, he's not going to run. Jumani is running, he's not going to run. If it's if no other New York City candidate is running for mayor for governor, I see for vanity purposes, de Blasio will throw his hat in the ring and look to run against Hochul.
He doesn't like you, though.
Excuse me?
If your own base doesn't like you, you don't really have a path.
Right. I don't think de Blasio could win this. I don't think he could win the city right now. You know, like, let alone the state.
Listen,
he doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
If he does choose to run, it'll be a base of the ego.
Him. But I mean, other than Jumani, is there anyone else that could possibly run that, you know, from upstate, find someone downstate, maybe a Latino lieutenant governor on the ticket, candidate on the ticket? I mean, is this it? Or do you think that there are going to be other people, other Democrats jumping into this?
There's talk of Balone, who's the Suffolk County supervisor. You know, probably follows a similar formula as Swazi, but I you guys may have heard of some other candidates. I haven't yet.
Mona, I think the wild card isn't necessarily a person. I think the wild card is going to be, apparently what I'm hearing, that by January there's going to be matching fund systems for the state. That's the wild card now, because if you do that, state elections now take a whole different, you know, look now and stuff, because, you know, everybody knew that running for a state position was always a little more difficult because, you know, you had to do so much more fundraising that you do in the city races because of the matching funds. Now, if January this comes in, you're opening almost what a lot of people think is Pandora's box in the state government now, you know, and so now that adds a whole different element to things now, because now you do have the opportunity of a lot of left-sided, you know, progressive folks jumping in for many of those assembly and state senator positions now here in the city, and you don't know what type of slate or thing could be put together with somebody like a Jumani and him putting together a slate of folks to run in these assemblies and all that, if now there's matching funds. So that's the true wild card right now.
That's true. So how much are they matching? I haven't looked at any official documents on it yet, but it seems like they're just going to pretty much like replicate, you know, what the city program is. It's just going to probably just be the 8-1. Wow.
That doesn't sound right. I don't think it's 8-1. I don't believe it's 8-1.
I hope they're not going to copy the city, because I think that the city council, the next cohort, need to revisit the matching funds program. I'm going to channel my inner Patrick Jenkins. They need to revisit that matching funds program.
It needs like serious reform, and somebody needs to investigate the campaign finance board. Okay, and no politician wants to talk about it because they know they'll screw them on their matching funds when they run for re-election. But it is just onerous. It seems very arbitrary on what they decide to go after, who they decide to, you know, persecute and sort of scrutinize, and it's the difficulty in just getting the money. You know, by the time you get it, you can't do anything with it in a lot of cases. I remember, I forget her name, the woman who ran for public advocate in the special election. She was sort of like the lefty creep. I forget what her name is. You guys probably remember her.
Beverito?
No, she has a YouTube show. Anyway, so yeah, so she got in trouble because she sent a bunch of money sort of like on a Saturday to some people that I know of in New Orleans, and like spent $100,000 on a canvas. And yes, that wasn't the right thing to do, but you know, well, when you give someone the money on a Saturday before a Tuesday election, there's not a lot you can do with it, you know, and they really have to have a system which is a lot more efficient, streamlined, and I totally understand that it's taxpayer money and you want to be careful with it. You don't want fraud, but it's so skewed towards the other side that it actually disables candidates, and it sets up a scenario where the person who would have been better funded anyway still has the advantage, because the person who doesn't have the party lawyer and the accountant and doesn't raise the money fast enough where they can hire somebody to deal with all the paperwork, and they're trudging along and they're asking people for $5 door to door. They're just as much disadvantaged as they were if they just had to raise it outright in some cases. So yes, I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah,
because we have to wait.
I just looked it up. It doesn't take effect until 2024, not next year.
Okay, got you.
I'm sorry, I can't remember. I hadn't heard that it was taking place so soon. It's in 2024. So we'll see. In 2024, with the state assembly races, and then the governor one would kick in. I guess 2 years after that. 2 years after that, when that's held in 2026. And it's $250 from donors gets matched 6-1. The old CFP system.
Yeah.
Before Ben Kalos managed to change it to give him more money to run for
20 to 1
for president.
wow.
But Leonardo's right. It will change the ball game somewhat, and those who are good at systems like that will be able to raise a good amount in public dollars to put on credible campaigns. The little guys who shouldn't be running in the first place will still have trouble getting votes and raising the money and hiring the appropriate attorneys or public finance people to do it. The one thing about the public financing system is that it makes a class of consultants who then also double as lobbyists, the next year, wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it basically does. And that's what I think needs to be looked at and properly discussed, and figuring out some way of separating out consultants who manage and run candidates, and then a year after the election, they're knocking on their door, hat in hand with their client, to lobby the person who they helped to get elected, or maybe opposed. But that doesn't seem to be appropriate. It seems it needs some sort of ethical barriers set in place. So I think that's what an investigation, or at least public hearings, or any kind of change, any reforms, should look at that, as to how do you separate out the folks who are making money running candidates, and then lobbying the successful ones who they ran to get things for their clients. Because if I have a political consulting firm and I've run 8 guys and they won and they're running the government, I'm going to advertise what I did as a campaign consultant, and now my lobbying business is to go out there and to help you maneuver this new government who I actually know.
Right, and the retainer increases exponentially.
But why are you coming for, as Seth Barron calls us, the consultants class? Why are you coming for the consultants class, Michael?
I'm not coming for it. I'm just saying you need to have some sort of ethical barriers that are set in place to sort of create some sort of it seems like it's a stacked deck. The same guys who are running people for office and being successful are now going to lobby them. There's no guarantee you're going to help my client, but it gets you through the door because you helped elect the mayor. You help elect members of the city council. You're lobbying for your client. It gets you in the door, and it gives your client the thought that maybe, something is going on. Maybe I'll be successful. I'm paying them all this money, and maybe I'll get my project through because my lobbyist knows these guys. I'll get a fair hearing, and that begins to warp things and sets in the mind of the public that the whole thing is rigged. No matter what you do, you can have public financing, but it's still rigged at the end of the day.
Well, let me say, like, we don't lobby, but there's another side of the coin from the consultant's point of view, which is you can't get paid because these people don't get the money to the point where they need it for everything else, and it makes it a struggle. And if you do take these outsider candidates, and there's the outsider candidate, there's the candidate who may win, there's the candidate who's the favorite, right? There's a sliding scale. Nobody does everything, and a lot of people take anything that comes their way. But, it makes it hard to get paid because these people don't have anything to give you. And by the time they have it, like, you're not their priority because you've already done everything. So there's another perspective from the consultant's point of view as far as the CFB goes, and a lot of these candidates, instead of campaigning, they're spending their days doing compliance because they don't have a full-time treasurer that they're able to pay because you can't only raise 190. And it's like, they're stuck in these situations where, again, I think it's not intuitive, but it's counter to the intention of the spirit of what it was supposed to accomplish.
Yeah, interesting. I just my last question, which will be the last topic that I do want to touch on, is the recent COVID mandates, de Blasio's COVID mandate, where he forgets about parents who have children under the age of 12, for example. But, I see that Letitia Romero and some other folks in Staten Island, I see Riley and Nicole, Mike Riley and Nicole also talking about lawsuits, saying that it's not the responsibility of businesses to police people or to, check to see if they're vaccinated or not. So my question to each of you is, do you believe that de Blasio overstepped with these mandates? Anyone can go first.
Which mandates? Mandates on state employees or on businesses demanding that you show that you've been vaccinated in order to sit indoors?
The one with the businesses. The state employees, they're government employees, and the city, they're city employees. I mean, there's not much that they can do. But for businesses, Michael, I mean, is it their responsibility to check? And is that a violation of people's privacy or HIPAA? I don't know. I mean, but do you think he's overstepping? Yes, no?
Oh, the public health has always, I guess, trumped other types of concerns if you can make it about public health. And courts have tended to listen to the public health experts when it comes to these sort of things. If were I in business, would I want to be demanding that my customers be vaccinated? Probably not. I would probably lean more towards, you ought to wear a mask if you're going to be indoors. Outdoor stuff is fine, and then see where it goes from there. There's just so much noise out there around COVID, around the Delta variant and what it all means and who's transmitting and who's not and how it all deals and how it all comes to. It's very confusing for people, and to put the onus on businesses to be the ones to be the enforcers, I think is improper. To answer your question, I think if you're vaccinated, you ought to be able to be, and you're unvaccinated, you ought to be vaccinated because people who are unvaccinated are getting sick, and you should not want to be sick. You should be looking forward to enjoying a normal life, and getting vaccinated helps you to do that and allows the city to return to some level of normalcy. But no, we should not be putting the onus on businesses to ask for your papers to prove that you're vaccinated in order for you to sit inside a movie theater or to have dinner inside a nice restaurant.
I agree. I mean, I feel like if you're afraid of these things in a business you enter, you should get vaccinated. know, I mean, that is sort of like, and I do believe that, you know, like Michael was saying, you know, there's a cycle here where it's becoming a pandemic of unvaccinated people. And, you know, that's sort of their responsibility. But I am a little leery of, you know, and I'm not a constitutional expert, but to me, private businesses being required to prohibit people based on whether or not they took a shot does seem like an overstep. I'm going to piss off a lot of my liberal friends here, which I consider myself one, but I feel like, you know, in a lot of these other countries, this Delta variant, it came and went, and I would be more focused on making sure we get everybody vaccinated than I would be on masks, and I would be on keeping people out of concerts or shows or restaurants, and because the evidence shows that if you're vaccinated, sure, you can get it, but the possibility of you being hospitalized or even transmitting it is so much lower that, you know, it really is the answer. And I think that's where we should focus our attention rather than sort of trying to keep people out of this place or that place. Because then we're talking about like a police sort of state, which we really don't want to enter into. You know?
That's true.
Yeah. So you know, for me, Mona, I don't know if I'm just taking it from my experience and stuff, but I don't feel like it's an overreach. You know, working in the education system, working with children, you know, I've always, you know, one of the biggest things was I had to make sure that my staff and myself all had the TB shot. Like you couldn't work in these environments with children if you didn't come back to work with the paperwork saying that you had gotten your TB shot and stuff, and nobody had a problem with that, right? And so that concerns me, especially when you link it to the fact that we don't really know the true impact that this variant has on children, right? And so everybody's having these arguments, and everybody is ready to go to battle and about, you know, you can't tell me the vaccine, you can't. At the end of the day, to me, I feel like these things are necessary because the ones that we should really be protecting are the children. You know, Mike, you know, you made a statement right now but the CDC and Dr. Fauci just said this week that, you know, this new variant, even if you're vaccinated, the variant that's out now, the Delta variant, you know, even the vaccinated carry enough of it to contaminate other people and stuff. And so I'm concerned with that when it comes to the children. And so I don't feel like it's an overreach because this is something that I've been around, you know, working, you know, in the field of, you know, education and around children. And I don't think it's any different than having to go take a TB shot. And it's even more important because we don't know what this is doing to the children and what the long-term effects are going to be.
Yeah, I think we agree, just in a different way. In other words, I'm trying to say that, like, I feel like putting the onus on a business to sort of regulate who frequents their business when they're trying to make money is sort of like the wrong way to do it. You know, in the military, you're mandated to get certain shots before this, so I could see why that would make total sense. And in many occupations, and I feel like herd immunity is the answer more than it is sort of like trying to, like, in the city of 8.5 million people, like, figure out who's vaccinated or not. I think we need to get people vaccinated. I believe in mandates in certain positions, like whether it be governmental positions, whether it be people who are educators. That's fine with me, you know what I mean? But and then you could say I don't want to do it, and then that's your decision. You have to deal with those consequences. But putting it on the private businesses, to me, I don't know. Like I don't know if that's the right approach. It almost seems like it's trying to solve the problem in reverse, you know, instead of trying to solve it sort of moving forward. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with so far the two Staten Island lawsuits. You know, I know a lot of people do believe that the onus should not be on the businesses. The businesses are trying to recover from the pandemic. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this is going to play out and see if the Delta variant numbers are going to increase. And then we are also, what are we now, 4 weeks shy of New York City schools opening, and we still don't have a plan. And you know, there's no remote option for parents, and that's you know, that's a whole other hot mess when it comes to de Blasio and the Department of Education. But I'm sure we're going to be talking about that in the coming weeks. It is a little after 9 o'clock, so I just want to say thank you to our guests, Michael Benjamin, Leonardo Coello, Michael Oliva. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us for On the Spot, our new weekly show that we're going to be having every Thursday at 8 o'clock. I also want to give a huge thank you. I asked a few people, what's a good name for the show? And, got a few suggestions and went with On the Spot, and my daughter seconded. But thank you, Michael Benjamin, for the name On the Spot. So,
you're welcome.
So with that,
I'm on the spot. Look at the background.
I think the four of us could have a good thing going here. We could,
listen, absolutely. Guess I know there's just going to be so much happening, in the coming weeks. It's going to be really interesting to see how so many things unfold. So to everyone, thank you so very much for joining us. To our guests, thank you for joining us as well, for the conversation, the analyses, the insight. And we hope to see everyone again next Thursday at On the Spot. Thank you. And good night. Be safe and be well.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.